Hi everybody, good night and welcome to another live chat. Today is World Suicide Day, Prevention Day. And so as I do every year or every few big days, like World Mental Health Month, World Mental Health Day, we try to do videos geared towards awareness and psychoeducational information. So what we'll be doing today is just looking at briefly some of the themes that we think about and we hear about when we think of World Suicide Day. Now, usually there are countless activities happening around the world. Some people light candles, some people have vigils, some people have events, awareness, training, etc. So within Guyana, I attended a World Suicide brunch this morning with SASOD, which is the organization that I am now the on-call psychologist for. So we would have had a talk from the Deputy High Commissioner of the British Embassy here, British High Commissioner, here. And so we would have had a speech and we talked about suicide. We talked about suicide also because SASOD deals with the LGBTQ community. We would have looked at things like limited resources, the challenges, and some of the successes that we have had. So that is something that we would have seen, that we would have had today. Unfortunately, I haven't heard much coming from the rest of the organizations. I know that there are other organizations that are doing things around suicide and suicide prevention in the month of September, not necessarily today. As most of you would know, suicide prevention in my mind and mental health awareness is ongoing. There's no just one day, there's no just 1 month. And so I don't put it past any NGO to have an activity or an event or a workshop anytime, at any point in time, but specifically at any point in time in September. So for example, Rainbow Foundation Guyana, also known as GAIBO, they have their open door office next Friday, and they have asked me to speak on suicide, so I will be doing that. So like I said, ongoing activities. So it's important for us to highlight what is happening. Now, what you would recognize from what I just said, I hope, is that majority of the things that are being done for World Suicide Prevention Day, or just in general for suicide and mental health, is actually really the NGOs. And for someone who spent time in an NGO doing mental health work, doing suicide prevention, I know that we, the NGOs, and we, the volunteers, and we, the members of nonprofit organizations, non-governmental organizations, have a very large role when it comes to suicide prevention and mental health awareness overall. So kudos to all of the NGOs that are doing something, and doing something this month and next month as well, when we have mental health awareness as well. I see some persons who have joined on, and I just want to give kudos and a applause for those, especially persons like Bibi, who have been with me for a few years in the challenges that we've had in terms of developing an awareness and developing a promotion for suicide prevention, especially through education and outreach and grassroots NGO work, and putting our blood, sweat, and tears into our projects to ensure that persons are getting the help that they need, persons are getting the knowledge that they require to get the help that they need. And so kudos for all of the NGOs, like I said, who are doing their thing in the fight against suicide and mental health stigma and mental health challenges that we see here in Guyana. Now, what I would like to just detour off for a second is I had been, most of you know, away from Guyana. And so, unfortunately, a lot of the work and a lot of the knowledge I had in terms of the suicide situation in Guyana is I'm missing bits for the past 2 years. So by all means, I just like to encourage persons who have been doing work with suicide and mental health in Guyana to please contact me and let me know what activities they've been doing, what talks they've had, what talks with the government. What has the government done? What can the government do better? So by all means, make contact with me. Let me know. Also, let me know if you have been exposed to any suicide deaths, anything that perhaps you need to process. I think the one thing that is definitely missing in Guyana is possibly more bereavement, and definitely bereavement groups. I think that it is actually a really great opportunity for persons who have lost someone, but specifically lost someone from suicide, to have group therapy sessions that are geared around bereavement. We have the same thing like for AA for persons who are alcoholics, and the same can be said for persons who have experienced trauma and persons who have experienced loss. So by all means, if you know that there's a community, especially in the regions of 2 and 6, that you think would benefit from doing some group therapy sessions, by all means, make contact with me, because definitely I see a niche for that, because we have persons who are committing suicide or thinking of committing suicide, or the families who have been left behind by someone who has successfully completed suicide. And so by all means, they definitely need the support. And so and that was something I thought that was missing, because I did a paper when I was in my master's on what happens actually with persons, families, communities, whole communities, workplaces that are affected by either the attempt or the completion of someone they know, suicide by someone they know. So definitely making contact with persons and seeking out support is important, because I think a lot of times we focus on the victims or the persons who are attempting to commit suicide with every good reason. They're the persons who need the most support. However, what I've noticed in Guyana is that what we don't also do is follow up with these families. And I think I spoke about this before. And I definitely, if anyone I have here attended my workshops when I did the suicide and the coping mechanisms on the second day of Mental Health Yourself, they would be able to hopefully remember when I said that the way the media covers the stories is done in such a way with it needs definitely some tweaking, needs a little bit more sensitivity, and you guys can go back to my interview with Mark Watson from like 2.5 years ago, where I spoke of my opinion of how the media at that time that was covering all the suicides, my feelings about the way in which they operated. However, the point I'm trying to make is that when we go and the media does what they do and they put the stories in the media, I always suggested to the media that they return to the families and do follow-ups and say, after the whole story is placed in the newspapers, what has life been like? How has life been dealing with the bereavement of the loss of your child, of your partner, of your family member, your community member? And I think that is something that I would definitely suggest to persons who are on my Facebook and on my YouTube, that if you are a reporter in Guyana and you do have a passion for suicide and mental health, that definitely making a connection back with some of those families and following up and writing a really great piece, because I think we always focus on the suicide itself, but we're not really thinking about the aftermath. And I think that's something that we always kind of miss. We always miss the before, which is the prevention, and we always kind of miss the after effect of the suicides that we have in Guyana. So I think definitely being able to pull the story properly together would help people to really understand how suicide affects people holistically, and not just in the attempt or not just in the succession of a suicide attempt. So I think that that's important to identify. I have some comments here. Let's go through. The media still covers it in the same fashion as they have done 2.5 years ago. Right. So thank you for the comment, Shivana. Because you're absolutely right. And I think that speaks to the fact that we have not necessarily grown in the sensitivity. And I think it's just a matter of someone Googling, a reporter, how to write a suicide newspaper report. And I mean, and I would, in the words of my supervisor, There's no limit to knowledge and development, Riza. She said that, you have everything, Google is there, use it, So by all means, I always get very irritated at the media when they don't do more. They throw this story into the media, they throw the suicide attempts and the successions, and there's no afterthought of, I wonder how these people are even doing. How has the suicide impacted them? Could we have prevented it? Could we have written differently? And I distinctly remember in that same interview with Mark Watson pulling out an example with an acquaintance of mine who did commit suicide, and saying that why do they need to put exactly how many capsules of so-and-so or how much amounts of poison that she took in the media? And I said there's always certain things that don't need detailing, and so that's just the media side of suicide prevention and management of the suicide as a topic in the media. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there for people to understand that suicide doesn't just end at the act. There's so much more that can be done after, and that's just from the media sector. Now, of course, the government, what they choose to do with the funds is really up to them. But of course, as everyone knows, I'm an advocate for persons being qualified and doing actual therapy. Of course, there's only a few of us in the country that can do therapy. And so I've been trying to understand. I'm very happy that I am with SASOD right now. And SASOD has given me an access really to the Guyana Equality Forum that include multiple NGOs. At one point in time, Global Shapers was there. I was a representative for Global Shapers at that time. And it was a really great forum, a great body of NGOs. And so in the brunch this morning, we gave out a list of NGOs that are doing work in Essequibo and Berbice, who are doing suicide prevention counseling. And so I think it's important for people to understand the limitations and the challenges with suicide prevention counseling. I'm always for the training. Who is training these NGOs? Who are training these persons? Two, and very importantly, we have to be aware of our level of competency, and we have to be aware of the risk of harm. Because sometimes we may be counseling someone, we think it's going great, and we actually end up sometimes doing more harm than good. And so we have to be aware of the risks that comes when you take the responsibility of being a counselor for something as serious as suicide. I've been doing informal counseling for like 15 years, and I've dealt with persons who are suicidal even before I was trained. And even now, after being trained for 2.5 years, I still get worried that, is what I've done enough in this hour with you, or over the several sessions? Is this enough? Am I going to read about you in the newspaper? And that's a genuine concern that I have had since being back for not even 2 weeks, and having clients now. You have to be wary that you have so much power. You wield so much power as a counselor and a psychotherapist and a psychologist. So I just wanted to put that out there. And 3, and very importantly, if you do decide to take on the responsibility of being a counselor or going into this program and being a psychologist, when you come out of it, it's the impact on you. And I think if anybody remembers, people who watch my videos, I did talk about mental health in practitioners and the effects. And from my understanding, the few psychologists we have here and so on, who do you go to? Who does the counselor go to? Who does the therapist go to when your own mental health is under siege? So I always encourage people to network and connect with other counselors, because you don't know when you'll need counseling yourself, because taking on these really serious topics can be very overwhelming. So I encourage everyone to continue the good work, continue trying to help people, be aware of your limitations, and definitely being able to always reach out to other persons to get your own help, because just because we're the helper doesn't mean we don't need help. I'm gonna take this comment. I really hope you guys can hear what's happening in the background with the dogs. Social interaction in Guyana doesn't seem equipped in dealing with the prevention of suicide because we miss the whole issue of cause and then the impact of consequences due to the basic lack of communication. Where's the rest? Oh no, I'm trying to press the rest. Yes, communication and appropriate interactions beginning at the family level. Society in Guyana is in denial about depression is real. You're absolutely right. I think that we are in denial of the situation in Guyana, and we have been in denial for decades. Like I said, go back to that Mark Watson interview. I had a lot to say, and I told people I've been watching and studying and reading about suicide since I was like 15 years old. So for us to have waited 10 years or more for the World Health Organization to come out and say that we have a problem, it's like, no, we always had a problem. We just weren't equipped at that time, whether resource-wise or mentally. We weren't prepared to deal with the reality of the situation. And second thing I'd like to definitely pinpoint in on what you said, Kai, is the family level, starting at the family level. I think that because that denial is so general and so across the board, we can't even find a moment where we're not in denial, even in our home family, about these are the people we live with. This is the people we grew up with. If your own mother can't see a change in behavior or doesn't know how to have that conversation with something's wrong, I can see in your face and so on, then that's going to be a really hard place to start with. And I think it comes down to really simple things. People's level of comfort, people's level of intellect, people's emotional intelligence. I think there's something in psychology we call insight. So that's the ability to see between what you just said, the cause and effect, the cause and impact. And so it's like explaining a story, and if someone doesn't really get what you're saying, they maybe have an impaired insight. And so when I'm listening with a client and I'm asking certain things and I'm seeing how they look at a picture and stuff, I'm writing down, okay, insight is impaired, insight is good, but judgment is impaired. And there's like moderate impaired, severely impaired. And so I get a grasp as their therapist whether they will understand some of the things that I'm saying to them or not, or some of the techniques to use, or to change the techniques up based on their ability to understand the topic and to understand how things are connected and so forth. Right. So I just wanted to, there was an article I found earlier, before I go, again, I'm trying really hard nowadays to get the talks down to like a good, decent time. And I know this could be like an hour long, but if I put it on for an hour, not everyone's going to watch it. So one of the things I wanted to draw on is when you Google World Suicide Prevention Day, there's an article, I'll post it out just now, where it talks about like the 21 reasons why I try to stay alive. And so in the article, there are multiple reasons people have said they've been exposed to funerals of persons who've committed suicide, and they said that they can never put people through that again, and or they would never have the heart to put someone through that after going to a funeral. And so that was one thing. They said that they stayed alive for their children, they stayed alive for their grandparents, they stayed alive for their grandchildren, they stayed alive for their dog. There was multiple things. But one of the things that definitely stood out to me was this theme that you find in the article where it talks about people getting used to the ups and downs of mental health. And I think that's something we don't realize. Like, depression is on a spectrum, large spectrum, in a sense that it can be really harsh one day, not so harsh another day. 6 weeks later, it might not be as present. I have clients who have told me they've battled with depression for like a decade, and these are young people. And so definitely it's something, and I found that persons, what they said was, and this again comes back to insight and perseverance and that kind of thing, because these people have said, I got used to the ups and downs of my depression. I've got used to having these ideations and them being fleeting, I've gotten used to wanting to do better and not let my mental health condition take over my life. I have stayed alive because I chose to not let little things overpower my life, because that is what depression does. It makes small things very large. It makes a mountain out of a molehill. And not to say that that's in a dramatic way, but cognitively, we just see things differently when we have a mental health condition. When we have depression, missing a bus is a big deal. But if you have some level of a healthy mental health or a healthy way of functioning, you're able to kind of deal with in such a way that there's some level of perseverance, there's some level of being able to get past certain things without it really getting down under your skin. And so I definitely will encourage everyone to read the article that I'm going to post out. But that was just some things that I wanted people to realize, that there are people amongst us who are constantly dealing with suicide ideation, suicide contemplation, and attempting. Most of you know, or should know, I've said it a few times, that persons don't just wake up one day and commit suicide. They have contemplated about it. They have had ideations for several years sometimes, and they do it. And sometimes they have a lot of attempts before they actually are successful. So there are signs. It's whether we're able to see them. And I think that really stems from awareness. And I think hopefully with me being back for a little while, I'll be able to try and get a little bit more awareness across and looking at signs. I've been to a lot of talks here in Guyana, and rarely do they teach you how to deal with someone who's coming out with suicide ideations, how to have the conversation about depression, like coping skills, just the communicating skills. People are not teaching that. But we're okay to talk about statistics because that's something you can Google. But you need a little bit more training to be able to teach someone, even if it's on a surface level, just how to deal with helping someone and also helping themselves after someone has just come out to them and told them about a traumatic incident or that they want to kill themselves. And you have to be able to kind of know what to say, because what people don't realize is that being the first responder does put you at a vulnerability to intensify, or as Kai would say, amplify these negativities, these negative feelings, these negative thoughts, these suicidal thoughts. And so definitely there's a lot of responsibility. And I encourage people to go get proper training, push NGOs to get persons, funding, grant funding, push the government to do more training, and not just like one day off trainings. Like, you guys know this by now. One day trainings are not enough unless you're dealing with like nurses and people who like are doctors or that kind of thing, very specialized. But you can't teach the average person in like a day how to be responsive to things like suicide. You can give tips, but that comes with practice. I've been doing this for like years, and I still find it difficult, not always, but sometimes, to ensure that I am doing the right thing that I was trained to do when you respond to suicide, and when you respond to domestic violence calls, and when you respond to people coming out about something that may not be very comfortable for you, especially when it comes to trauma. So anyway, thank you all for tuning in. Remember, share, share, share. Thank you for those who have shared my video, BB, and I saw someone else share it. Thank you. But go to my YouTube, subscribe, check back some of the videos, see what I've been talking about, especially regarding suicide, because today is World Prevention Suicide Day, and so World Suicide Prevention Day. And so thank you all for tuning in. Kai, I'm just gonna read this out loud, and then for those who are gonna watch on YouTube, I'm not sure if they'll see these comments. Gotta admit that life has positive and negatives, things which are unfavorable. And it seems that we are geared to be competitive and having to have been seen or accepted. At least that can be an overlooked perspective. Exactly. So I'm just going to take that first part, which speaks about we have the ups and downs. And I kind of am encouraging people to understand that main point, that life is not always going to be exactly what you want it to be. But I think one of the big things that we're missing a lot of times is especially coping mechanisms, but understanding that life ebbs and weaves and that mental health is a spectrum, and that you have to be able to still find a way to function with your mental health without going to a place that's so negative that there's no coming back when you have these suicidal ideations and so on. All right, another time, another topic. Thank you guys for checking in, and keep being great. Remember, if you have to ask and it's awkward, it's probably a good question to ask if someone's feeling suicidal. Okay? Good night and good luck with everything. And let me know if people have, like I said, events that are happening or would like me to come in and speak or do anything like that. Just let me know. I'm always here to help. Thank you and good night.